And so when you're talking about taxes, what type of tax system do you want? Do you want high tax rates, low tax rates? Do you want the tax code to be used by politicians to try to control the economy? These are some important issues that you want to have in the back of your mind anytime you're contemplating how a good tax system should look. And so let's look at sort of the principles of what I would argue are good tax policy. And they're really a couple. You want low tax rates. You want to make sure you're not double taxing saving and investing. You don't want the government to try to pick winners and losers in the tax code. In other words, tax all income alike, what economists call neutrality. And then you also want to have this common sense notion of territorial taxation, which we won't even cover that because I think it's a given. Everyone, politicians might not follow the good policy, but everyone knows that government should only tax what's inside their borders. So let's talk about the principle of a low tax rate. And what economists mean by this is you want the marginal tax rate. In other words, how much tax will you pay if you earn more income? You want that rate to be low because you want to encourage people to earn more income, to be more productive, to be more entrepreneurial. A low tax rate, in effect, reduces the price of engaging in productive economic behavior. And not only that, when tax rates are low, people also have a much better incentive to not hide and shelter and underreport their income. And there's a lot of academic research. We could talk for hours about the academic research on tax rates. And it's generally a consensus in the literature among academic experts and scholars that if you have tax rates less than 20%, for the most part, people will work and save and invest. It's not, they won't view the tax code as a big impediment that discourages them from being productive. Now, philosophically, I want tax rates to be as low as possible simply because I think people deserve to keep the money they earn. So I want tax rates of 0% or 5%. I don't want them to be 20%. I'm simply making the point from an economic perspective. If tax rates are 20% or below, for the most part, people are willing to work and be productive. But when tax rates start climbing above 20%, and especially as they get to 30 and 40 and 50%, you have big negative effects on people's willingness to earn income and be productive. And this little visual I have right here, it's basically on the left side of the screen, you see a person trying to figure out, well, should I work harder to earn another $1,000? Well, at a 0% marginal tax rate, in other words, if he earns another $1,000 and gets to keep all that money, then yes, he has a big incentive to earn more money. If the tax rate is 20%, well, he might not like giving 20% of his income to politicians, but sure, why not? You still get to keep $800, so it's a good deal. But a 50% marginal tax rate, the person might decide, well, I'd rather just relax more, spend more time with my family. I might rather just watch TV instead of trying to open up a new business or working harder. And of course, if the tax rate is 100%, nobody's going to want to earn more income. So you want to focus on keeping marginal tax rates low. And this is an image that I sometimes share with American politicians, because American politicians all the time say, we need higher taxes on tobacco because we want people to smoke less. Well, economically, they're correct. I mean, whether they should try to control people's private behavior, let's set that issue aside. But as an economic matter, the more you tax of something, the less you get of it. And this image simply makes the point that if higher taxes discourage smoking, don't higher taxes on work discourage working? Of course they do. You want tax rates low, especially on things that are good for the economy, like work, saving, investment. Now, speaking of saving and investing, one of the principles of good tax policy is only tax income one time. Now, most of you, I assume, are students. And when I was young and a student, I didn't really appreciate this because I had no saving, I had no investing. Maybe I had jobs that gave me a little bit of money, but all I would focus on is the tax on labor income. Well, it's also very important to look at the tax on capital income. In other words, saving and investing. This is very important because every single economic theory, even socialism, even Marxism, every economic theory agrees you have to have saving and investing for economic growth. You have to set aside some of today's income to finance future prosperity. The problem is in many countries, and obviously I don't know the details about the tax system in Georgia, but in the United States and in countries like the United Kingdom and France and Germany, there's a major problem in that you have a discriminatory tax system that penalizes saving and investing. Now, I'm sure you won't be able to read these boxes on the screen, but all it shows that if you earn money and you pay tax on the money, you then have after-tax income. You have two choices of how to use that after-tax income. You can immediately consume it, or you can save and invest it. If you immediately consume on the left side of the screen, in the United States, there's no tax implications. You don't get taxed for consuming your after-tax income. But if you save and invest your after-tax income, that's the right side of the screen, you could be hit by all these extra layers of tax: capital gains tax, corporate income tax, dividend taxation, death taxes. And so in effect, what we have in many countries around the world is that the tax system has a penalty on people who save and invest their after-tax income compared to those who consume their after-tax income. Now, there's nothing wrong with consumption. Ultimately, the reason we work, and for that matter, the reason we save and invest is because we want to enjoy more consumption. However, if you penalize and punish saving and investing, what happens is you have less consumption in the future, you have less prosperity in the future. So principle one, keep tax rates low. Principle two, don't penalize saving and investing. And when I talk about this to American politicians, and I put this flow chart in front of them, even if they are close to it and they can read all the boxes, it's probably too complicated for politicians. So I tried to figure out what's a better way of describing this. And I tell politicians to imagine that their job is that they're a farmer and that they have an apple orchard. And so they have to plant apple trees, they have to fertilize them, of course they have to buy the land, and all these costs, all the investment and savings that goes into creating an apple orchard. And then I tell them, after they've taken all those risks, they bought the land, they bought the trees, they waited years for the trees to grow, they finally have a crop of apples. And the politicians, they can understand that. It's a pretty simple example. And I then ask them, you finally have a crop of apples, how do you harvest the apples? Do you pick them from the tree, or do you chop down the tree? Now, it's probably easier to pick apples if you chop down the tree. But even a politician understands that if you chop down the tree, you won't have apples next year. And that's the principle of why we don't want to overtax saving and investing. Now, technically, even in a high tax country, they're not chopping down the tree, but they're definitely sawing branches off the tree. So when you tax saving and investing, what you're doing is you're reducing your future income because you're going to have fewer apples in the future. In this example, the tree is saving and investing, and the apples are the income from saving and investing. So I don't like taxes, but if politicians are going to impose taxes, yes, pick some of the apples from the tree, take some of the apples from the apple farmer, but don't saw branches off the tree because then there's fewer apples in the future. So again, going back to where I started with this presentation, you want long-run economic growth to make your country richer, more prosperous, and to create better lives for people. if you overtax saving and investing, that's a very, very bad idea in terms of prosperity. So first principle, low tax rates. Second principle, don't penalize saving and investing. And the third principle is neutrality. Don't have politicians try to pick winners and losers in the tax code. Now, I'm going to show you a visual of how many pages there are in the tax code in the United States. Way back in 1913, when we first put in an income tax, the entire federal tax code was 400 pages. Now it's 75,000 pages. Why do we have 75,000 pages in our tax code? Because politicians have spent more than 100 years putting in special favors for their friends, special loopholes, special exemptions, special deductions, special credits. All these things make the tax code a backdoor form of industrial policy. And why do we have all these loopholes? Because politicians are trying to bribe people and encourage people to do things that don't make economic sense. Now, what does that mean? It means that in the long run, your economy won't grow as fast because people are going to be allocating labor and capital in less efficient ways. It's sort of like if you want to travel from your home to school, you obviously want to take the most efficient route, the fastest route, the route with the least amount of traffic. Well, the way to think about government industrial policy in the tax code is that they're putting up barriers and forcing you to take the long way to school or the long way to go back home. They're making you use up more gas. They're putting more wear and tear on your car, or things like that. So as a taxpayer, I sometimes like loopholes because it means I get to lower my tax burden. But when it leads me to make decisions that don't make sense, that means the economy suffers. So 3 principles of tax: keep your tax rates low, don't penalize saving and investing, and don't have special loopholes that try to lure people into making bad economic decisions. So if we follow all these basic principles of tax policy and fix them, you get a flat tax. 1 low rate, no double taxation, no special loopholes. So I'm a big fan of the flat tax. I'm a big fan of keeping tax rates low. I'm a big fan of no double taxation. And I'm a big fan of having no loopholes in the tax code. So countries with flat taxes, they tend to grow faster. They tend to have better tax compliance, all sorts of good results if you have better tax policy. It's not the flat tax itself that's the magic solution. It's the fact that you have low tax rates, no double taxation, and no loopholes. That's what helps an economy grow faster. Now, obviously, one of my earlier slides pointed out that there are many levers that influence the economy. There's trade policy, regulatory policy, all these things. I'm simply talking here about tax policy. So if you have really good tax policy, but then you have really bad monetary policy, really bad trade policy, your economy might still not grow fast. In other words, you need to have good policy in many areas, but of course today we're focusing on tax policy.